So this is why what we see here, this idea of translation, is going to mean something more. Now, most people kind of believe, and many of the scholars believe, when we talk about translating, as the dust was translated from dust to a human being, and we can see this articulation in our own lives. We see human beings. They're not, it's just a pile of dirt. It's a human being. But you see this dirt moved into a human being, and from this, Hanok is translated because Yah took him. Lakach, Yah took him, and he took him, and what does that mean? He translated him by taking him away. And so you have this translation of this human being into a spirit being, if you will, into a transformed or translated body, this Hanok. And we see now, there are many discussions of this in Scripture. There is this discussion of Isaiah, who says, I saw the throne, which means he was translated. You have the idea of Eliyahu or Elijah, Eliyahu, being translated. You have the idea, Paul says, I knew a guy who saw the third heaven, speaking about himself 14 years before, claiming he was translated. You have Yochanan, or the author of Kizayon, Revelation, saying he was translated. He was there at the throne room seeing the saints under the throne and the 144,000 and the seraphim worshiping around the throne and the elders and so on and so forth. This depicts this idea of being translated from here, from humanity, being translated into the seventh heaven or the third heaven, or depending on how you want to number them or how they're numbered or whatever. I don't know. I can't tell you how they're numbered. But we do know that we have this idea that there were personas in Scripture that were translated. They were taken away. They did not see death. And this is what the author in Ibrim is telling us. He did not see death because Yah took him. Yah took him. Okay? So this is kind of an important part about Hanok. I also find it interesting that he was 364 years or 365 years old, because we have this discussion about the 364-day calendar, and yet Hanok saw 365 years. That's very interesting. All right, so let's get into some more of the credibility on this thing. And slide 9 is a very important slide because it's going to show us a fragment of the 10 Hanok manuscripts that were found among the Dead Sea Scrolls, okay? Now here's this fragment, and here is the translation. Now this is where this gets very important, because people who are so offended by Hanok, they're offended by the idea that Genesis 6 would relate that these people, these watchers, came to earth, and it wasn't the children of Seth or the children of Cain, but rather it was fallen angels. And so here's what the fragment says. Here's what the fragment reads that's in this particular Dead Sea Scroll fragment, which is fragment B from a cave 4 at Qumran. They, the leaders, and all of them took for themselves wives from all that they chose, and they began to cohabit with them and to defile themselves with them and to teach them sorcery and spells and the cutting of roots and to acquaint these with herbs. And they became pregnant by them and bore great giants 3,000 cubits high. Now people say, oh, 3,000 cubits, that's way too big. Well, it depends on the cubit, right? It depends on what cubit you're discussing. Now, if you're discussing the cubit that we all believe is the cubit, which of course is, from the forearm to the tip of the finger, right? That cubit. That's one cubit. But what if the cubit they're discussing here was, from this knuckle to the end of the thumb? What if that's the cubit? We don't know what the cubit was, but it's an ancient writing. It was a writing that appeared before the flood. Now, I want to read a passage here from Bereshith, Genesis chapter 6. This is the controversial passage about which, I get kicked out of Pentecostal churches all the time for just raising this issue. And it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of Elohim, and that's the big question, right? The Ben Elohim, saw at the daughters of men that they were fair, and they took them women of all which they chose. And Yahweh said, my Ruach shall not always strive with men, for that he also is flesh. Yet his days shall be 120 years. His days shall be 120 years. Yet there were Nephilim in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of Elohim came into and unto the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. And the same became warriors and tyrants, which were of ancient times men of infamy.